The Galactic fleet hovered above the smoldering ruins of Earth's last orbital defenses. Victory had been declared. Admiral Zalzor of the Vathari Dominion stood aboard the command deck of his flagship, gazing at the devastated blue planet below. Reports poured in from fleet captains, each confirming the same thing: humanity was finished. The final resistance had been crushed, and the Dominion's conquest of the Sol system was complete. The Vathari were a proud and ancient species, ruling vast sectors of the galaxy. Humanity, a young and defiant upstart, had dared to resist their rule. For years, the war had dragged on, with Earth refusing to kneel, but the Dominion had finally brought its full force to bear. The orbital bombardment had reduced entire continents to rubble, leaving nothing but scattered survivors hiding in underground bunkers. The great cities of Earth, New York, Tokyo, London, lay in ruins. There was no fleet left, no standing army to resist them. A holographic transmission flickered to life before Admiral Zalzor, displaying the smirking face of High Chancellor Rethzir. "It is done, then?" the Chancellor asked. "Yes, High Chancellor. Humanity has been eradicated as a military threat," Zalzor said, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "The planet will be occupied within the next rotation. Their surviving population will be subjugated, as per your orders." Rethzir nodded. "Good. The Dominion has no need for rebels. Make an example of them. Let the galaxy know what happens to those who resist our will." With that, the transmission ended, and the Admiral allowed himself a moment to bask in victory. The war had been brutal, but the outcome was inevitable. The Dominion was an empire spanning thousands of star systems. Humanity had been nothing more than a stubborn annoyance. Then the alarms blared. A shrill, piercing wail echoed through the command deck, and officers scrambled to their stations. Zalzor turned sharply. "Report!" "Admiral," one of the sensor officers stammered, We're detecting multiple warp signatures, massive energy surges at the edge of the system." Zalzor frowned. This was impossible. The human fleet had been annihilated. Earth's shipyards had been reduced to ashes. Where could reinforcements be coming from? "Put it on the main display," he ordered. The holographic screen flickered, and the bridge crew collectively recoiled. Space at the edge of the Sol system twisted and burned as something emerged from the void. Something massive. No, not something. Many things. Hundreds of ships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the distant light of the sun. They weren't like the fragile, outdated vessels the Vathari had fought and destroyed before. These were monstrous warships, titanic behemoths bristling with weapons that pulsed with barely contained power. Zalzor felt a cold dread seep into his bones. "By the void. What are those?" "Dreadnoughts," a voice came from behind him. The Admiral turned to see a captured human officer, bound in restraints, staring at the screen with a grim smile. The prisoner, Captain Elias Graves of the United Earth Navy, had been taken alive just days ago. Zalzor had ignored him, assuming his people were already extinct. "Impossible," Zalzor hissed. "Humanity had no such fleet. We destroyed their shipyards." Graves chuckled, a hollow, dark sound. "Yeah, you destroyed what we wanted you to see." Zalzor's mandibles twitched in fury. "Explain yourself, human. You thought Earth was our stronghold?" Graves smirked. "That was just our home. Our real fleets were elsewhere, preparing for this moment. We saw what happened to the other species you conquered. We knew this day would come." Zalzor turned back to the display. More ships poured out of warp, an unrelenting tide of steel and firepower. The largest of them loomed at the heart of the formation, an immense vessel unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. It dwarfed even Zalzor's flagship, a monstrous colossus designed for one purpose: total annihilation. A transmission suddenly cut through their comms, overriding their encryption. The Dominion's fleet was being hailed. Zalzor hesitated for a brief moment before accepting the transmission. The screen flickered again, and the image of a human admiral appeared. A woman with cold, steel-gray eyes and a uniform adorned with the insignia of the United Earth Navy. "This is Admiral Catherine Mercer of the UNSV Warhammer," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "To the Vathari fleet occupying Sol, you have one chance. Surrender now or be destroyed." Silence fell over the bridge. Zalzor's officers looked to him, waiting for his response. He bared his fangs in rage. "You think you can threaten us, human? We are the Vathari Dominion. We crushed your world. Time's up," Mercer interrupted. "Open fire." The display flared white as the first volley struck. The battle for Earth had only just begun. The silence before the storm lasted no more than a second. Then, the dreadnoughts opened fire. From the massive hulls of the United Earth, Navy's warships came lances of energy so intense they turned the void of space into a battlefield of light and fury. The first volley struck true, slamming into the Dominion's outermost vessels with horrifying precision. Shield generators, designed to withstand conventional human weapons, buckled and collapsed under the sheer power of the onslaught. Explosions ripped through the Vathari fleet. Battleships that had once rained fire upon Earth's surface were now torn apart like brittle toys. Fireballs erupted in the cold vacuum of space, consuming crews who had believed the battle was already won. Admiral Zalzor barely had time to react. "Evasive maneuvers! Raise the defensive grid! Return fire now!" he bellowed. The bridge erupted into chaos. Officers scrambled to relay orders as the Dominion's fleet desperately tried to organize a counterattack. Plasma turrets and ion lances fired wildly into the darkness, but it was clear within moments that something was horribly wrong. The human dreadnoughts weren't just big. They were fast. Dominion warships were designed for attrition warfare, slowly advancing and overwhelming enemies with sheer firepower and numbers. But these human behemoths moved with unnatural agility, dodging through the chaos of battle like predators among prey. Then came the second wave. The Warhammer, Admiral Mercer's flagship, surged forward, leading the assault. Dozens of massive cannons along its hull unleashed a devastating barrage that obliterated an entire squadron of Vathari cruisers in an instant. The Tyrant's fall, another dreadnought, tore through the Dominion's formation, its railguns piercing even the heaviest shields like they were paper. The Dominion's grand fleet, the same force that had raised Earth's surface, was being ripped apart. Zalzor's mind reeled. This was impossible. The humans should have been defeated. They should have been scattered, broken, begging for mercy. Instead, they had come back stronger, with weapons the Dominion had never seen before. Desperate, Zalzor turned to his weapons officer. "Target their lead ship. I want that dreadnought destroyed." The officer's claws shook as he relayed the command. The Vathari's heaviest warships aligned their sights on the Warhammer. A storm of plasma torpedoes and antimatter lances surged toward the human flagship. The void itself seemed to shudder under the sheer amount of firepower unleashed. For a moment, Zalzor felt a sliver of relief. No ship, no matter how powerful, could withstand a direct strike from the full might of the Dominion's fleet. Then the Warhammer's shields flared. Instead of collapsing, they absorbed the impact, dispersing the energy harmlessly across their surface. The torpedoes detonated, but the damage was minimal. The dreadnought emerged from the barrage unscathed. What technology is this?" Zalzor whispered. The captured human, Captain Elias Graves, still standing in his restraints at the back of the bridge, chuckled darkly. You're not fighting the same Earth you thought you conquered. Zalzor turned to him in fury. What did you do? Graves grinned. We knew you were coming. We've been preparing for decades. The Dominion had always assumed that humanity was reckless, that their resistance was an act of desperation rather than strategy. But the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity hadn't lost the war. They had played dead. The old fleets that the Vathari had obliterated. They were sacrifices, outdated ships meant to give the illusion of weakness. The shipyards the Dominion had bombed into oblivion. Decoys. The real war effort had been happening off-world, in hidden bases scattered throughout deep space. Entire fleets had been built in the darkness, beyond the reach of the Dominion's gaze. And now, they had returned. The Vathari weren't fighting desperate rebels. They were facing an entire species that had spent decades mastering the art of war. A new transmission interrupted the bridge's chaos. Admiral Mercer's face appeared once more, her expression cold and merciless. Admiral Zalzor, she said, I gave you a chance to surrender. You chose otherwise. Now, we end this. Before Zalzor could respond, the Warhammer fired its main cannon. A beam of pure energy, brighter than a dying star, tore through space. It slammed into the Dominion's flagship, a colossal battlecruiser at the heart of the formation. The shields didn't even have time to fail. The entire ship exploded instantly, vaporized by the sheer force of the impact. Zalzor's mandibles trembled. He had seen planetary bombardments with less destructive force than that single shot. The Dominion was losing. No, they had already lost. Sir, a Vathari officer whispered in horror, our ships are breaking formation. The fleet is in full retreat. Zalzor's mind spun. The Vathari never retreated. They were conquerors, the dominant force in the galaxy. But now, they were nothing more than prey. Captain Graves exhaled slowly, watching the battlefield unfold on the view screen. He shook his head. You should have left us alone. The Vathari had declared victory too soon. Now, humanity would teach them what real war looked like. And Earth never forgave. The Vathari fleet was in full retreat. What had begun as a triumphant display of Dominion supremacy had turned into an unthinkable nightmare. Their warships, once so confident in their conquest, were now scattering like insects before a wildfire. Admiral Zalzor could barely process the reality unfolding before him. The Vathari Dominion did not retreat. In all their years of galactic conquest, no species had ever pushed them back. Until now. But retreat did not mean survival. The human dreadnoughts were relentless. They moved with terrifying coordination, cutting off escape routes and obliterating any Vathari vessel that strayed too far from the failing formation. The Dominion's fleet had entered the Sol system as an unstoppable armada. Now, it was a broken swarm of fleeing wreckage. Zalzor's personal flagship, the Vakari, had suffered severe damage. The once mighty vessel shuddered as emergency protocols struggled to keep its systems from failing completely. Fires raged on multiple decks, and the screams of dying crew filled the comms channels. A communications officer, his voice trembling, called out, "Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from over 200 ships. Many have lost all power. The humans, they are boarding them." Zalzor's mandibles clenched. Boarding? The Vathari had always assumed humans fought like prey, defensive, desperate, weak, but these were not the humans they had studied. These were something else entirely. He turned to his tactical officer. "Deploy all remaining fighters. Buy us time to escape." The officer hesitated. "Sir, we don't have enough left. Our squadrons were—" A deep shudder ran through the ship as another explosion rocked the hull. The Vakari was taking direct fire, and then the worst possible thing happened. The lights on the bridge flickered and died. A single sound replaced them, a deep, mechanical hum. It was the sound of a boarding breach. Zalzor barely had time to reach for his sidearm before the reinforced blast doors at the far end of the bridge exploded inward. Through the smoke and fire, they emerged. Humans, not the frail diplomats or trembling prisoners the Vathari had encountered before. These were soldiers, clad in black combat armor that pulsed with a strange, shifting energy. Their weapons were unlike anything Zalzor had ever seen. Sleek, efficient, designed for war on a level beyond Dominion understanding. At their head stood Captain Elias Graves, freed from his restraints, wearing a blood-stained Vathari officer's coat over his human battle armor. Graves looked at Zalzor with a cold, knowing smile. "Told you we were just getting started," he said. Zalzor's mind raced. How? How had Graves gotten free? How had the humans breached their flagship? Had the Dominion truly underestimated them this badly? A Vathari guard lunged forward, but before he could fire, Graves put a single round through his skull. The alien crumpled instantly. Zalzor reached for his own weapon. He never got the chance to use it. Graves moved faster than Zalzor had thought possible, grabbing the Admiral by the throat and slamming him against the burning console. The Vathari's mandibles clicked in panic as he struggled against the human's grip. "You don't look so high and mighty now, do you?" Graves growled. "Not so tough when your fleet's burning, huh?" Zalzor gasped, his vision blurring. "Your species was supposed to be inferior." Graves barked out a laugh. "Yeah, we hear that a lot." He shoved Zalzor to the floor, his boot pressing down hard on the Admiral's chest. "You made one big mistake, bug." Zalzor wheezed. What mistake?" Graves leaned in close, his eyes gleaming with something primal, something vengeful. "You didn't finish the job." With a swift motion, Graves raised his weapon and fired. The last thing Admiral Zalzor saw was a flash of blue light before his world went dark. Across the battlefield, the Dominion collapsed, with their flagship leaderless and their warships being systematically eradicated. The remaining Vathari forces attempted a full-scale surrender, but Earth did not accept surrender so easily. The dreadnoughts kept firing. Boarding teams continued their brutal sweep of captured vessels, ensuring that no Vathari officer would live to wage war again. The Dominion had razed Earth, murdered billions, and laughed as they declared victory. Now they would learn what vengeance looked like. Admiral Mercer watched from the bridge of the Warhammer, her expression unreadable. "Status report," a lieutenant responded. "The last major Dominion warships are disabled. Some are trying to jump to warp, but..." A distant explosion lit up the view screen as another escaping Vathari vessel was annihilated. "They're not getting far." Mercer exhaled slowly. This was justice, but it was also just the beginning. She turned to her officers. "We send a message to the rest of the galaxy," she ordered. The comms officer nodded. Moments later, a broadcast went out, one that would echo across every Dominion world, every conquered system, every species that had ever suffered under Vathari rule. The message was simple. Earth is not conquered, humanity stands, and now we are coming for you. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The galaxy trembled. For centuries, the Vathari Dominion had ruled with an iron grip. Their fleets were unmatched, their power unquestioned. They had crushed empires, annihilated civilizations, and rewritten history as they saw fit. And yet, in a single battle, they had lost everything. The fall of the Dominion's grand fleet at Earth was not just a military defeat. It was a message. The species they had dismissed as primitive, The race they had sworn to exterminate had not only survived, but had returned with a vengeance so brutal, so merciless, that it sent shockwaves across the stars. The broadcast from Admiral Mercer echoed across Dominion space. Millions of Vathari civilians watched in horrified silence as the once mighty fleet burned, as their warriors were slaughtered, and as the humans delivered a chilling declaration of war. Earth is not conquered. Humanity stands, and now we are coming for you. Panic spread like wildfire. On the Dominion homeworld of Zrakvar, the High Chancellor Rethzir stood in his private chamber, mandibles twitching as he replayed the footage for the third time. He could not believe what he was seeing. The Warhammer and its dreadnoughts had torn through the Grand Fleet like it was nothing. The admiral he had trusted, Zalzor, had been killed aboard his own ship, his corpse likely floating somewhere in the cold void. The unstoppable armada that had raised Earth had been hunted down like prey. This was not how it was supposed to happen. Rethzir's advisors stood behind him, their normally arrogant postures stiff with fear. One of them, Minister Korath, finally spoke. "High Chancellor," he said carefully, we must prepare for the worst." Rethzir turned sharply. "The worst?" "The worst was supposed to be our victory." He slammed a clawed fist on the table. "We wiped out their defenses. We burned their world. How could they have built such a fleet in secret?" The other advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, another minister spoke. "We underestimated them." Rethzir's eyes burned with fury. "We dominate this galaxy. Humanity was just another rebellious species, another empire to be crushed." Korath shook his head. "No, High Chancellor. They were never an empire." Rethzir narrowed his eyes. "What are you saying?" The minister exhaled. "Empires fight for resources. They conquer for control. The humans are not fighting for either. They are fighting for revenge. And that makes them more dangerous than anything we've ever faced." Silence filled the chamber. Because they all knew he was right. Empires could be reasoned with. Civilizations could be negotiated with. But a species fighting for vengeance? There was no stopping that. And then the alarms blared. A panicked officer rushed into the room, eyes wide with terror. "High Chancellor, the humans are here!" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Rethzir stepped forward. "What?" the officer gulped. "A massive fleet has just dropped out of warp at the edge of Dominion space. Their warships, their dreadnoughts. They are advancing at full speed." Rethzir's blood ran cold. They had no time. The war hadn't just begun. It was already at their doorstep. At the helm of the Warhammer, Admiral Mercer stood tall, her gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Dominion's border defenses. The enemy stations were scrambling to react, but it was already too late. The humans were here. "Admiral," a bridge officer reported, "enemy defenses are powering up. They are preparing to fire." Mercer exhaled. "Let them." The Warhammer and its fleet did not slow down. They did not open negotiations. They simply fired first. A wall of energy and kinetic destruction surged forward. Railguns capable of tearing through planets, plasma lances that burned like miniature stars. Humanity's full arsenal was unleashed in one single, terrifying barrage. The Dominion's border defenses, once considered impenetrable, shattered in seconds. Space itself seemed to tremble as human warships tore through Vathari installations, their precision strikes surgical, brutal, and relentless. Within minutes, entire defensive stations were nothing but floating wreckage. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled as gods. Now, they were running. Mercer watched as Dominion warships attempted to flee deeper into their own space. She did not let them. "Deploy hunter squadrons," she ordered. From the hangars of Earth's warships, sleek, black interceptors launched into the void. They moved with terrifying speed, hunting down escaping Vathari vessels like wolves chasing wounded prey. Across the Dominion's border worlds, chaos erupted. Civilian populations, once confident in the safety of their mighty empire, now screamed in terror as human warships darkened their skies. Cities burned, military bases crumbled, and unlike the Vathari, who had left survivors to spread fear, the humans were different. They left no one behind. Every military installation was systematically wiped out. Every warship was hunted to the last. This was not war, this was retribution. On a Dominion-controlled colony, a terrified governor tried desperately to send out a distress signal. His claws trembled as he activated the transmission beacon, hoping, praying that someone, somewhere, would send help. Then, the screen flickered. A human appeared. Admiral Mercer. Her expression was cold, her eyes like steel. "This is Admiral Mercer of the United Earth Navy," she said calmly. "Your leaders have led you into ruin. Your empire is dying. Your fleet is gone. There is no escape." The governor swallowed hard, his mandibles clattering in fear. Mercer continued. "The Dominion burned Earth. They slaughtered billions of innocent lives." She leaned forward. "And now, we are here to return the favor." The governor's breathing grew frantic. Please, we are just civilians. We surrender." Mercer did not blink. "There is no surrender." The transmission cut out. Moments later, the colony was erased from existence. From the ruins of their empire, the Vathari finally understood the truth. Humanity was not an empire to be conquered. They were a storm, a force of nature that had been unleashed upon the stars, and they would not stop until the Dominion was ashes. The Dominion was collapsing, system by system, world by world. Entire planets that had once flown the Vathari banner now burned beneath the black hulls of Earth's warships. The galaxy's once mighty conquerors found themselves facing a force they could not comprehend, a force driven not by conquest, not by greed, but by pure, unrelenting hatred. There was no diplomacy, no offers of surrender, only fire. On the frozen colony of Jarkelis, the sky split apart as the first human dreadnoughts entered orbit. The Vathari governor, a creature who had overseen the enslavement of 24 human cities during the occupation of Earth, watched in horror from the safety of his bunker. His mind clung to the old arrogance. Surely they would offer terms. Surely the humans would want prisoners or territory. But the humans did not hail them. They did not negotiate. They simply began the extermination. Orbital bombardments hammered the colony's defenses, reducing centuries of Vathari architecture to molten slag in mere minutes. Anti-air batteries that had stood for generations were reduced to craters before they could fire a single shot, and when the smoke cleared, the humans came down. They moved in perfect formations, black-armored infantry, cold and methodical. They gave no quarter. Entire Vathari cities were dragged from their homes. Military officers were executed on sight. Civilians who had cheered during the conquest of Earth were lined up in the streets and left to rot. By nightfall, Jarkelis belonged to Earth. No prisoners, no survivors. The humans didn't even bother raising their own flag. They left the ruins empty, a warning to every Dominion world that still remained. Deep within the Vathari Dominion, whispers spread. The humans weren't simply retaliating for the war. They were avenging every atrocity the Vathari had ever committed. For centuries, the Dominion had enslaved weaker species. They had razed worlds, executed entire populations, and written off entire civilizations as nothing more than footnotes in history. Now those sins were being repaid in full, one massacre at a time. On Yaros Prime, The Dominion had once forced captured humans to build monuments to Vathari victory, great towers made of metal and bone, where human slaves had died for the first time in thousands of years. The galaxy was silent. The war was over. The Vathari Dominion, an empire that had once stretched across thousands of star systems, was gone. Its homeworlds were reduced to barren wastelands, its fleets turned to drifting wreckage, its rulers executed with the same merciless efficiency with which they had once ruled. The species that had enslaved entire civilizations, raised planets, and rewritten history as they saw fit had been erased. Not conquered, not subjugated, erased. The galaxy did not mourn them, but it feared what had taken their place. The United Earth Navy, the dreadnoughts, the black-armored soldiers, the unstoppable war machine that had brought the Dominion to its knees, should have ruled the stars after their victory. They had the firepower, they had the technology, they could have built their own empire, subjugated weaker species, become the new dominant force in the galaxy. But they didn't. As suddenly as they had arrived, humanity vanished. The dreadnoughts that had darkened the skies above Vathari homeworlds disappeared into the void. The soldiers that had executed Dominion leaders one by one were never seen again. They left behind no occupied worlds, no ruling government, no demands, only ruins. It was as if they had never been there at all, except for the nightmares they left behind. In the aftermath of the war, the surviving species gathered in secret. The once mighty empires of the galaxy, the Terraki, the Zillions, the Othraki Confederacy, met on neutral ground to discuss one thing only: the humans. "We must learn from the Vathari's mistake," one Othraki diplomat said, his voice shaking. "Humanity was underestimated. The price was extinction." "They are gone now," a Terraki warlord growled. "Why should we fear them?" The others exchanged nervous glances. Are they? That was the question no one could answer. No one had seen a human since the war ended. No distress signals, no new colonies, no ambassadors, no broadcasts, no signs of life at all. It was as if they had simply disappeared. And yet, their warning remained. Across the ruins of Vathari space, the message still echoed through abandoned comms relays, etched into the shattered remains of planetary outposts. A final reminder, a final threat. "We are watching, we are waiting. Strike at us again, and we will return. And this time, we will not leave anything behind." The centuries passed. A new galactic order formed. Old empires fell, new ones rose, but none dared to claim the space where the Vathari had once ruled. It remained untouched, the haunted remains of a species that had been wiped from existence. Travelers whispered of strange anomalies in the abandoned sectors, ships that never returned, fleets that simply vanished. And in the dark, among the wreckage of dead planets, some swore they saw them, black warships moving without sound, appearing only for an instant before disappearing back into the void. A ghost fleet, a reminder that somewhere out there humanity still watched, waiting, ready. On a lonely outpost at the edge of the galaxy, an automated distress signal flickered to life. A cargo freighter, missing for weeks, had suddenly reappeared, drifting in space. A salvage team was sent to investigate. When they boarded, they found no crew, no signs of struggle. Only a single message, written in old Terran script, burned into the walls of the bridge. 3 words: "We never left." The galaxy shuddered. Because now, they finally understood. Humanity was not a race. It was not an empire. It was a warning, and it would never fade.